Chair, we're going to go live.
All right. Will you tell us? All right, thank you. This is, I'm calling to order the meeting of the Board of Directors of Greater Richmond Transit for May. And let's just do our introductions. I'm Ben Campbell, I'm Chair representing Richmond.
I'm Neil Gibson, going for Bonnie.
Julie Tim, CEO.
Gary, right, County.
Dan Schmidt in Wacom County.
Lincoln Saunders, Richmond. Jim Engel, Chesterfield County.
All right. Oh, it's not here. Go that way.
Thanks for
James.
Townsend, Chief Financial Administrative Officer. Becoming very directed in maintenance, GRTC.
Tony Thompson, Director of Procurement. Acting Manager of Organizational Assistance.
Do the effective and policy.
Cheryl Adams.
John Longo's IT here.
Good morning, Bonnie, Executive Director of RideFinders.
Charles Rodigo, resident of Chesterfield. Always thought I think about David those operators.
FSK Operator.
Tim Long, Chief of Service Operations.
Chief Officer.
Anthony Carter, Director of Risk Management.
Thank you, Carter.
Barb Smith, Chesterfield.
Thanks, Bob. All right, are there any public comments this morning? Ashley, you got anything? Or is there anyone who would like to speak after Ashley be ready?
Good, can you hear me?
Mhm.
Good morning, everybody. The public notice, meeting agenda, and agenda attachments for this May 24th standing meeting of the Board of GRTC, RideFinders, and Ultimate Management Company were posted on May 16th, 2022 at RideGRTC.com. For the meeting notice, all written comments received via email by Ashley Mason prior to 5 p.m. on the day preceding a meeting was provided to all members of the board the night before the meeting and read during the public comment period of the meeting by staff, following the 2-minute speaking limit, and will be included in the minutes of the meeting. Also, for the meeting notice, this meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. This week, I received no submitted comments in writing.
Thank you. Is there anyone present who'd like to speak, Charles?
Thank you. I'm Charles Rodigo. I'm one of the 350,000 or so residents who have no bus. I've spoken frequently in the past, pre-COVID days, and it's a pleasure to be here, see you in your new gig. And I'm looking forward to a lot of things to come. With the new board, you have 3 members from each of the 3 jurisdictions. That implies a parity among those jurisdictions. A parity of, it should include service, planning, and finance. The disparity in service is so notorious, it's tedious to mention, with no service in Chesterfield, except for one route down Route 1. On the financing, I want to raise one issue which I spotted in your packet for today's meeting. The proposed baseline budget for 2023. This is page 64 in that packet. The contributions projected for the jurisdictions are as follows. From the city of Richmond, 7,554,000. From the county of Henrico, 4,108,000. From the county of Chesterfield, 248,863. Not even a $250,000. I would like to know what the reason for that is. It's Chesterfield said the code is deadbeat, that it can't be better than that, because they don't want to. I think this is an example of the disparities that pervade this company's operation. And I won't go any further, but I presented this kind of thing to you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Yes, sir.
Good morning again.
Good morning.
In the morning, we see the GRTC commercials about our family farm. Unfortunately, this is not true. The company is shrinking in the army. Since the January booking, over 39 operators have left the company. Only 3 retirements, 26 by resignation. Some of the resignation were for operators with 15 to 20 years of service. We also have lost at least 9 people in the maintenance department, at least 3 supervisors, and at least 2 department heads. Back in September of 2021, I issued a company letter sounding the alarm about the mass act. We are having, and will continue to have, unless we get competitive with other companies. I had a recruiter reach out to me from another company, actually, what are we doing? Operators at GRTC, and because he had over 20 applicants on his desk. The only thing I can tell them is that they don't feel safe, and if they get into an altercation with the pastor and have to defend themselves, they will get terminated and national tell employees, if you don't like how the company being run, seek employment elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Your name, sir, is?
Maurice Scott.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mhm. Yes.
Good morning, my name is Xavier Stokes, and I am an operator for GRTC. I'm also an operator with the non-disability. I'm also an EMT. To back with Maurice stated, I know the concern is why such a high turnover rate here, and I can say in my 5 years of operation here, it's hostile working to experience what we experienced while in operation on those buses out there in the street, to receive unfair disciplinary action is like a slap in the face to all operators across the board. And in my situation, to receive unfair discipline as a protected class is a huge smack in the face. Here recently, I just received the biggest verbal beatdown in my 5 years of operation. Excuse me, we're living with this. My gender was attacked. My disability was attacked. I was threatened with my life, and this company makes our riders feel so empowered that he even threatened my job. I dare not repeat some of the things that were said to me because they were so bad I had to talk to my psychiatrist. And to receive 2 days in the street for going into an emotional roller coaster after receiving that type of treatment, I couldn't even get on the bus at all. Was just, I felt like I didn't have any support or any protection. So with that being said, it's not just happening to me, it's happening to operators across the board. And they don't feel protected. We don't feel protected. We are literally, our backs are against the wall. So if we blow a whistle or anything, we fear of losing our job. That's all I have.
Are there any further comments, public comments? All right, thank you. We have a consent agenda this morning. Let me just say on the agenda, just to make sure that we keep our quorum for action today. Gary had to be out of town making money, and somebody's got to do that. I'm going to move the action item on the budget up under right after the consent agenda, so we'll discuss that then. So, but let's look at the consent agenda first. You got 5 items on it. First is the minutes of the last meeting. The second is the minutes of the board budget workshop, which we did. The third is the state aid grant application submission for RideFinders. And the fourth and fifth are the technology purchases for the 15 new buses, which we have to do regularly when we get new equipment. Are there any comments or questions on any of these items?
On the 15 buses that you want to vote on the consent agenda, does that include any of the articulators, or are you still looking at it?
No, so this is not going to purchase the buses. These are for the 15 buses that the board approved purchase of approximately 1.5 to 2 years ago. These are regular 40-foot buses, CNGs that would have the technology put on them when they arrive.
And they have arrived yet or not?
They're in the process of arriving, I believe, the end of June.
They're online now.
They arrive in a bunch or kind of sequentially?
Over the period of a week or two, they come in.
Okay, great. Any further, so you all understand these are technologies we have to put on our buses. We have to purchase them extra after we purchase the buses. Are there any further questions about this on anything on the agenda, consent agenda? Could I have a motion to approve the consent? Second, please.
Second.
All right. Then moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, it's approved. Thank you. And we'll move now to the operational budget and capital plan. Mr. Zinzarella.
And members of the board. We're going to go down to slide 54 in your budget package, or in the board package, which is the budget slides. What is up on the screen here is the resolution. I know we met on May 2nd for the budget workshop. I'm here to walk through as much depth as you would like, or answer any questions. Or if you'd like, I can go through the resolution and then the PowerPoint. Please let me know how would like me to proceed. I'll just kind of give the highlights of what we, based upon the budget workshop, what we agreed and how it's been, integrated into this plan.
Why don't you do that?
Okay. So the best way to do that here is walking through the resolution. So as we discussed at the prior budget workshop, we prepared a draft budget presented to the existing board in January 2022. And then based upon our subsequent changes in our budget workshop, the following adjustments you'll see halfway down on page 54 are the zero fare matching support. The assumption is that the $1 million matching contribution from the city of Richmond is contained within their fiscal 2023 operating contribution. As for the operating contributions from the city of Richmond and Henrico and Chesterfield counties, and this can put some clarification on Mr. Robido's question. The assumption is that it's going to be utilizing a 7.5% CPU indexing, which is in compliance with the Code of Virginia section 33.2 through 37-12, which is the continued responsibility of local transit funding. Just to take a brief review of that, that legislature, as I just quoted, basically states what the contribution, the minimum contribution levels for each of the entities that are contained within CBTA that make contributions to public transit. So basically, it is no less than 50% of what their fiscal year 2019 appropriations are for transit. So the numbers in this 2023 proposed baseline budget is the 50% of those funding appropriations for fiscal 19 indexed by 7.5%, which is the assumption for what the CPIU is. We will have the actual number probably by July 10th for the entire year once the Department of Labor publishes it. So that should provide some clarity to Mr. Rovo's question, as well as one of the key assumptions in the budget with regards to the operating contributions. In addition, in this, as we discussed, given that the increases in the GRTC funding for fiscal 2022 as well as projected 2023, that the budget will establish a GRTC operations reserve funded to 25% of projected operating expenses. On the expense side of the budget, subsequent to the January meeting, as well as leading up and into the May budget workshop, we increased the authorized operator headcount to 275, from 275 FTEs, 300 FTEs basically, to which is our planned staffing level in order to achieve our current the objectives without having to reduce service, as well as put ourselves in a position for expansion in the future, which coincides with some of the recruiting programs and television advertising programs that we have undertaken and assumed in the budget as well. In addition, since the budget workshop, we've taken a hard look, as we had indicated. We're looking at utility and fuel costs. So we made adjustments to CNG year-over-year budget about $518,000, and diesel and gasoline about $35,000, and other utilities about $104,000. As a reminder, as we discussed, we're under a diesel contract through September, and then we have to renegotiate. So we're protected somewhat for the first quarter, but as you can see, trips outside of the gas pump, we try to be realistic and utilize some indices to project what the costs would be. So what we're proposing here is a draft budget of 63.7. Excuse me, amending the draft budget of 63.7 million to the current 64.5 million that's contained within the agenda. And I think at this time, if you have any questions, I'll address those.
Any questions about this work? I know we've all looked at this budget at the workshop and familiar with it. You ready to vote on the budget? No questions. Okay. So we're going to have a vote then. Somebody move this budget for fiscal 23. Second. Then moved and seconded to approve this operational budget. Is the capital plan in this as well? Yes.
On the bottom of the on the bottom of page 55, we presented the draft capital plan in January, and then we had Julie presented at the April board the 5-year capital plan, which contained this. Just to highlight, there are some slight modifications from the January capital plan as it was presented, and those are highlighted on the bottom of slide 55. In essence, just some cleaning that, safety and regulatory requests, certain projects request to safety and regulatory is added, about 334,000, the station repairs, software contracts, and the facility exhaust system. And there was a removal of one project, the police video project, which on further review was redundant and contained within another project that reduced it about 350. So all in all, safety and regulatory decreased about 22,000. State good repair projects. Those also came down based upon a refreshed estimate for the fixed route vehicle replacements, which dropped the budget estimate about $750,000. We moved the paratransit vehicle purchases out 1 year. So that reduced the January draft proposal by about $1 million per year, $380,000. And we added some key facility repair projects for about $335,000 to address the centrifugal pumps and the HVAC RTUs. And then in the business improvement, which is probably the biggest change, is we, at the time when we were presenting the January budget, we didn't have firm pricing on the ERP project, which was brought to the board, I believe, in the month of March, it was approved. So we've added the $2.7 million in there for phase one of the ERP EAM project. So that's what the increase for the business improvement. So all in all,
Could I ask for clarification on what the ERP project is?
ERP is the enterprise resource planning, so it's the base operating system of the organization. Currently, we're in great planning. It's no longer, the version we're on is no longer in support.
Great, so this is that whole piece of work we're doing on to get our system right. Yeah, any further questions about this? Yeah.
Yes, very good. I'm not looking for any amendments or making a move to this today, but I would ask, given the conversations we had during a work session and simply to speak what I am hearing more and more about from both the mayor as well as council leadership in the city, as well as our residents. Mr. Chair and the director, I would ask for our next meeting, I would be interested in us seeing a more a strengthened plan for both shelter and bus amenity improvements. Looking at, I'd like to have a more detailed conversation looking at where our priority locations are and how we can utilize more of the available one-time funding to make. I believe we've talked about, or the planning from the, before the board transition was about $3 million in spending in that regard. Given the state of things, I would wonder if we could not take a more aggressive path to making shelter as well as stop improvements generally. It seems like it is simply a growing need, and if we can make significant investments in the people who are riding GRTC today, that would be a good use of some of the funding we have available to us.
We actually can bring that to the board next month.
Okay, further comments? All right, so go back and who made the motion for that? Somebody moved that we pass this? Danny, okay, second is Tyrone. It's been moved and seconded. Any further conversation? It's been moved and seconded that we approve the operations budget and capital plan for fiscal 2023. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Budget is passed. Thank you very much, and thanks for this good work. I think that's basically what we've got in terms of that, and we can move on to the information items, or we want to get these other.
We can do the information on, if I might make a slight introduction to it. I have asked the team to, at desire of the board, to be more streamlined as they present these, to only present those things that changed since the last month rather than going into detail. There are some items there that we do want to go into more detail and that I will go into my CEO's report, such as the staffing issues. And so you'll hear a little bit about it now, and we'll have a more robust conversation about that during my report.
Okay. So, Cheryl, operations and maintenance report, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. As Julie stated, staff will give you a brief highlight of anything you have questions on or anything that they want to draw your attention to. Starting off with Mr. Tim Farr, then Ms. Stan Fink will give you the ridership report.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. You'll see on the board packet pages 2021, starting with the KPIs and the operation report specifically for transportation. A lot of what we do is predicated, of course, around staffing. Julie will go into more detail about that a little later. What I will tell you is that currently we have 234 full-time and 27 part-time operators. We have 20 operators currently in various stages of training with our next operator class starting on June the 6th. And that's pretty much all I'm going to say for now. Any questions, comments as it relates to my portion of the report?
Yeah, what's the big drop in Spectran on-time performance?
Mainly due to staffing challenges that they have, as we have in Fitz Route as well. So they're working on a plan to get more operators in. As you get more operators, then those trips will run more consistently all the time.
And Spectran is a subcontract for us.
Yes.
Thank you. Any further questions, Tim? Thanks.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So we'll give a quick update on ridership. This is on page 23 of the packet. There's not a lot of difference from last month's report. Local fixed route ridership remains about the same as pre-pandemic levels, and Pulse and Express remain down a little bit from pre-pandemic levels. So keeping it brief, did you have any questions?
Okay, thank you. Boy, it really moves along, doesn't it, hey, Tony?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'll be going on the safety performance report for the month of April. This is found on pages 25 and 29 of the board packet. Just quick points of interest. This year, uptick in the amount of events we had from the month of April, month of March to April. Also, we did see a slight intake in some of the verbal assaults. Some of the initiatives that we're doing to try to control this and get more involved in the actual field, safety blitzes, some of the management departments, as well as some of the training and supervision of doing safety blitzes, going out being more involved in the field, monitoring the operators, making sure that they're doing what they can stay as safe as possible. Also, some initiatives with VCU police so far as coming on board, showing more of a presence, not necessarily policing, but just being on to show a presence. We find that that's great support to the operators. If there's no questions, that concludes the safety performance report.
We have a question.
Yes, sir.
So who filed the verbal assaults are filed? You said a slight uptick. So it was 7 verbal assaults during the month of May.
Yes, sir.
I mean, well, from the last reporting period, I guess.
Yes, sir. Then basically what we're saying is, we know that a lot goes on the buses. These are actual stuff that's been reported, actual stops operations. The actual verbal assaults aren't as bad as they seem to be. It's more or less a misunderstanding that elevates to bad language. It's not a situation where, it's as bad as it seems, but we have seen an uptick in those.
So the operators, I guess my point is, the operators filed a report that says that there was a verbal assault.
Yeah, they call it dispatch and stops operation.
Okay. So we actually stopped the movement of the bus.
Yes, sir.
Right. What about police? How often do we call police in?
Well, every time when the situation comes up like that, it comes to dispatch then communicates to the police. And police are arriving on the scene.
So every time there's a verbal assault?
Not every time. And see, what we have is we have a group of wonderful operators that are using de-escalation skills. But not every time that there's a verbal assault, police do arrive. Some situations, the police, aren't involved. Sometimes supervision comes, sometimes the operators handle it themselves. But when we report those verbal assaults, those are the actual situations where they contact dispatch and operation stop.
Can they watch that live on a camera, or is that something that's reviewed after the incident?
It's reviewed after the incident. And there's some technology that we're working on where we are going to be moving towards live cameras, and we can actually view that, but as of now, it's recorded and then viewed.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to downplay the fact that there is a lot more aggression and rudeness on our buses than we have ever seen before. It plays out in our communities and it's certainly in our buses, and our operators are being trained to be able to handle it. The pressure is very, very high on them and the burnout is very high on them, and we are seeing that. We have some other initiatives we're working on to try to get some more peer group and some more support groups for our operators. It is coming, but it can't come fast enough. They are under a lot of pressure. What we report here is, as Tony mentioned, just those things where the operator feels they cannot handle it and they need support.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there a report on accommodations and complaints? It was in the package at one time. Is it, have seen lately?
We can bring those back. We actually were looking to reformat that complaint, and we have it, but it's not in the board report. We'll make sure this is in the board report in the future.
Incidents ever result in individuals being banned from future ridership.
Yes, they do, and that's a challenge for us.
I would imagine with fare free, it's even harder to.
Well, even with fares, it's hard because a person's identity is not tied to their fare card, and even if it is, people can hand off the fare cards. We have a board where when we see an incident that's escalated, where the operator reports it, we try and capture that person's face, and we put it on either a banned board or a person of concern, so that operators, as they're coming in, they see that person's face. If they see that person come on board, if they feel unsafe, we don't want them to interact with that person in case there is it could escalate, but they can call into dispatch. We can get the police there and give them better support. But banning someone from a bus means that the operators have to become police, and that's unsafe for them. So bringing the awareness to our operators, giving those spaces so that they can get the additional support is what we're really focusing on. We're also focusing on getting that live feed so that if someone comes on, they need a support, the police or our supervision can get a live view of what's going on. And we have some grants in place to try and start that up in the next couple of years. But procurement process, not our procurement process specifically, but across the country, is amazingly developed right now, logistics and supply chain issues.
Question.
Yes.
Is this a national trend or is this?
The violence and the assaults, it is a national trend. It is something that's come up not just in transit, but I think in communities across the country. Transit ridership and transit is a reflection of our community. So when we see things on transit, it's because it's elevated and escalated in our entire community. It's one of the reasons why the partnership with the BCU security has been such a blessing, and we hope to see the same kind of partnerships with our other police, where they don't necessarily police on our buses, but just have a presence to remind people. And we have a kindness campaign that we're going to be looking at. We found that those types of campaigns versus telling people be nice or we're going to throw you off, but please support your operators, has been more productive. So we're trying different methods to get that message out. We are struggling.
We have monthly communication with other organizations within the region, and as well, they're dealing with the same things about violence. So we're trying to come up with ideas on how to attack that. And by overwhelming de-escalation training is the best way to proceed and get the best results.
If I might, I just can't emphasize enough some of the de-escalation we're hearing back from some of our operators and what they're doing. Very, very proud of the work they're doing, but again, it's very stressful when you're constantly having that. And most of our riders are also amazing riders, but all it takes is a few incidents a day to build up on.
Okay, Mr. Carter, thank you. Any further comments? Thank you for your report. Mr. Byrd.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Chair and members of the board. The maintenance report that's found on page 30 of the board package. Parts have become an issue being parked into repair most of our vehicles, especially paratransit. But thanks to HR, we've got stacking up almost to 100%. So we're doing best we can.
Mechanics up.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're only missing 2 right now.
Excellent. Any further questions of Mr. Byrd? Yeah.
Mr. Burke, can you also discuss slightly some of the issues with supply chain and parts?
Yes, Ford, we're in need of engines from Ford to fix, and repair, replace our paratransit vehicles. There seem to be 1 to 2 years out as far as engines, motor mounts, things of that nature. But as soon as things start to straighten out, we will get some of those parts in. Right now, it's about 2 years out.
For parts for the friends and repair, yeah.
Yes,
So what are you doing in the meantime?
we're trying to keep what we have running for as long as we can until new vehicles come.
I imagine also using surplus fleet
Yes,
with drivers, with operator shortage, I'd imagine, and operation decreases, I'd imagine a surplus fleet, that's where you,
so
if you have a bus
we-
down, you can put out a play for a little while while you're surplus.
Yes, we're the vehicles we were going to take out of service, we're keeping them in service longer to keep them operational. So we can have enough vehicles in service.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Tony, you mentioned 2 mechanics down, just for a historical perspective. How low was it at some point in time?
We were 11 down.
Out of how many?
If you add the body shop, also would be about 15,
Out of a total of what?
total 35.
But now we're at 2.
Body shop, 2 more,
Body shop
so
too.
a total of 4 or 5.
Yes, 4, yes.
Are you still outsourcing, repairs on, the, CFD?
We tried to outsource, but they're having the same difficulty we are. And as a, they don't think really have anybody to work them out, residential gas fee.
Okay, any further questions? Thank you, sir. Now we go to the full financial report. Thank you, Cheryl, Ms. Adams, for this.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Page 31 in your packet, you will find the March 2022 financial report. Reminder that this is March, so it's lagging a little bit from behind. Maybe some numbers that Martin has cited on page 1 as well as Tony Bird. But very similar to the prior month briefings, for 9 months ended March 31st, revenues are unfairly by about 4.94 million on the budget of 47.4 million, or 10.43%. And as in the past several months briefings, this is on the federal funds line, which is where the majority of the unfavorable performance is, and that's basically due as a function of the below budget operating expenses. There's most of this, outside the operating contributions, expense reimbursement through either the 5307 Flex or CARES, CRISA, ARPA combination. So you'll see that on page 32 on the source of funds. On page, we'll go to, call your attention to pages 35 and 36, which is the operating expense summary. So you'll see at the bottom of page 36, the 9 months ended March 31st, operating expenses are below budget at 5.87 million, or about 12%. This is primarily headcount being driven. On that report, headcount showing about 4.65 million below budget in expenses. One issue I just want to call out, I think we had this discussion about 6 months ago. The calendarization of the 2022 budget is done on a cash basis, when the actuals are done on an accrual basis. So the third payroll is an issue. So about $1 million of this favorableness on the labor budget is due to that the financial statements are put on the accrual basis, where the budget is done on a cash basis. We're going to fix that in the 2023 calendarization, so that the calendarization reflects the accrual nature of the payroll expenses. So, like I said, about $1 million of that 5.87 million is due to the difference between cash basis and accrual basis. Items to note, as we had talked about, in there, the positions, as of March, there were about 27 vacant operator positions, and there were 20 positions in totality of maintenance that were vacant at the time, but the combination of HR has still been, as Mr. Bird has reported on. The materials and services line, which also is relevant to what Mr. Bird is talking about, is a little unfavorable, about 616,000, as we discussed in the last meeting. On the fuels and lubricants line, it's about 319,000 favorable. A good portion of that, $186,000, came in our February financial statements. That was due to the CNG true-up, the billion contract going for the periods of January 2020 through September 21, as well as CNG, and we're also experiencing some significant increases as well. So that's one of the reasons why we took a look back to the fiscal 23 budget about CNG costs as well. In addition, vehicle parts and equipment are unfair about 256,000, and other equipment is 538,000. This is both combined inflation and supply chain, Keynesian economic supply and demand prices are going up. So those are highlights. The casualties and liability costs is very favorable. That's more or less due to the participation of the liability pools we discussed in prior periods. Calling over on statement of income on page 48. You can see the impact of the difference between the full basis and the cash basis in the left column for where the current month budget going down the bottom, the change in that position was a negative $1,095,000. That's basically more expensive than revenues. But as you do four columns over year to date, that position, we're about $249,000 positive surplus. And that is usually in the months we're trying to look to zero, but in the months when we utilize PM or 88 Flex, it's based upon a reimbursement of specific eligible expenses. So it's kind of hard to hit zero when we get pretty close. So pretty much you'll see all the expenses are very favorable, and it's more or less it's the unfavorable revenue lines of the federal funds between the COVID relief as well as the operating contributions. Expenses are running below budget. I'll fall over to the balance sheet on page 49. Still, it's a strong balance sheet. Trends from year end, more cash. Call out the receivable balance at the end of March of $9.37 million. That's a little bit higher, but that's based upon we had quite a few months during January, February, and March federal reimbursement receivables. We were waiting for the FDA to program our 5307 as well as our CRISA grants. So those have now been programmed. So you'll see in the cash flow in the next exhibit that all that writes itself. So popping over to page 50, you'll see on the cash flow, and this highlights the operating expense count. At the end of March, we had a low of about 363,000, but we've had a significant amount of federal reimbursement and receivables, and you can see in the month of April, CDTA funds come in at 4.7 million, and you see the lift in the state funds as we talked about GRTC for fiscal 2022. For the months of April, May, and June, there's an incremental $2 million for a total of $6 million. So you see on the state line going up from about 400 million to over 3 million, as well as the federal funds. You see in May, significant 5.3 infusion. That's basically the receipt of the January, February, and March federal reimbursements, as well as you can see out there in June as we discussed improving the various clever technology. We're receiving new buses. So as you'll see up on the top in June, we had an $8 million vehicle purchase, and down in the state and federal, we had reimbursement in the month of June. But as you can see, as we exit the year, we are expecting a healthy position in the operating account. Page 51, this is just we filed the quarterly report with CDTA prior to the May 15th deadline. So this is kind of just the snapshot of the activity for the next quarter, which will be June 30th, which has the month of April's data. Item I want to call out to you, kind of down on the fund balance composition is April 30th, the last line item, the restricted funds, GRTC fiscal year 2023. GRTC operating capital expenses, there's already $20.36 million that's in that account. That's, as you recall, our budget for fiscal 23 is $21.4 million. So through the end of April, we almost have the entirety of our funding for the fiscal 23 CDTA funding for support operations. With that, I'll conclude my report and field any questions that you have.
So, John, when we're down below the original budget by around 4.8 or 4.9 million in expenses, and there, I mean, in receipts from the federal government, that money then goes over to our capital capacity. Is that correct?
It depends if it's programmed. So what we do is, we get the award, the 5307 award from the FAA, as we just got the fiscal 23 award, or 22 award. And we then have to go through and establish our split letter with Petersburg. But then after we have our amount, we program, which basically is we communicate to FAA and say, of that, let's just use an example of $12 million. We're going to use, of that 12 million, $7.5 million for PM Flex, $1.2 million for ADA Flex, and the balance is for X, Y, and Z capital projects. Until we program it, we can basically determine whether it's going to be capital or flex to PM. So what was holding up the reimbursements for January, February were twofold. The CRISA, which was the $3.2 million COVID relief money that we received in February, March of 2021. As we had expended the CARES, we basically wanted to we had to give them a type of expense buckets, operating expense buckets of what we would spend it. So we did that, and the FDA takes its time to review it, ask some questions, fix the language, and that got approved. So the 5307, what happened was there's periods. What we were waiting for the 5307 redo was we had about 2019 award, we had given it a period which we still had left over program PM and ADA Flex, but the period to use it had passed, so we had to go back and go in and say, okay, that unused balance, which was about $1.5 million for one, or $7.5 million for one, and about $1.5 million for the other, was extending through fiscal 23. So that's what kind of takes some time, but that's why we'd rather wait programming until we actually have the approved operating and capital budgets, and then we can be very diligent and precise with the programming and make it a little bit easier.
Okay. So I tend to oversimplify it, but the oversimplification of it is that, yes, if we don't use that money, it basically allows us to have more money in our capital fund. We do not lose it. And
It's
just a
not
matter of
lost money.
No,
It's just-
it's the way we smear it out from year to year. Smears being the technical.
All right, other questions about Mr. Zinzarella's report?
I just got one, if I can, John, before you go. On page 50, the cash flow projection, is it, to make sure I'm reading it right. The actual cash flow position at the end of March was dwindling, it was 363. That distribution, I guess, you guys call it a draw. The 4.7 million that was drawn down from page 51 from the CBTA fund. That's scheduled, or was that done because the cash flow position got 6? It looks like you pulled it in April, and it was the Q4 draw, right?
Right. What we do is we take, simplicity, we take the amount for CBTA funding to support operations. That's in the approved regional public transportation fund approved by CBTA.
Yeah.
We just divide that into 4 pieces, and we draw it the first of each quarter in advance.
Gotcha. So the April pull is the actual 4th quarter of that
Right.
current report in advance.
Yes, so it's scheduled and planned to do that. What basically, we knew as we were watching this is, you'll notice that this 363, if you go to the balance sheet of the previous page, there's $4 million. The cash line is inclusive of also the capital fund, the payroll account. But this is specifically just for operating checkbook.
So the next piece of paper, page 50, when we see projected July, even if the conservative excess is still in the $7-8 million range, you'll still make that scheduled draw.
Yes.
Further questions? Thank you very much for your report. We have to approve anything here, right? So we've done Tanya, Office Tanya. Recent and upcoming procurements.
Good morning. Your report can be found on pages 52 and 53 of the board packet. I'm sorry, good morning, Mr. Chair. No new projects have been added to the report since my April date. We are progressing nicely with the procurements for specialized transportation services, the temporary transfer center construction, and on-call construction management, construction engineering, and inspection services. The goal is to bring you an award recommendation in June for all 3 of those projects. Additionally, I have begun to plan and develop the solicitation for on-call A&E services and hope to advertise for this service in early June. Lastly, we requested, as you can see on page 53 of your report, we requested authority to award a contract to Colonial Oil Industries. The contract value is below 100,000, but more than 50,000, so it required Reverend Campbell's approval. Reverend Campbell did approve the award of the contract. However, as you may have noticed, the oil industry is facing uncertainty with its supply and volatility in its pricing due to the Russian-Ukrainian war and lasting effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. As a result, Colonial Oil Industries is telling me that they are not able to honor their contract and are requesting we seek services elsewhere. While I was able to secure one load from the only other bid, no, I'm sorry, there were two other bidders, but the next lowest bidder for gasoline last week, I am not certain they will be able to honor any future requests. So I will be working to secure a contract if possible for gasoline services. This concludes my report. Are there any questions?
Sure, I understand that the president is talking about releasing diesel fuel for delivery tractor trailers and stuff like that, so that they can deliver the products. Does transit have any opportunities to get in on that?
I'm not sure if we do. I will certainly look into it. I do know that we have our contract is available to us through November.
For diesel, it's through
September. So I will research that immediately.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're rocking along here. You ready for your report?
Yes, sir. And I will likely restructure my report to talk about the staffing last and ask for support from my team as part of the discussion. But Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the CEO's report for the month of May. She was going by fast. The first item I'd like to talk about very briefly is the fact that we did receive notice on Friday that Whitecoat Lab, the court case Whitecoat versus GRTC, the result came back from the appeals court. For those of you who are unfamiliar with that, there was about 3 years ago, there was a request for an advertiser to put an ad on one of our buses, and that was denied because it was felt by the staff at that time that it was politically based. And under our advertising rules, it's no political ads, simply put. Whitefield Lab did challenge that. They won in the first court, went to appeals, and they won the appeal. So that was the cause. For those of you who weren't here, the longstanding board members will recall in September, we suspended our advertising contract because there were other ads that we had also banned under that same clause, and that put us at risk for additional court cases. Turns out that being upheld, we do have to continue to watch our advertising policy. I'll come back with a recommendation in June or July for how to proceed after I talk to legal. At this point, I have not spoken to legal in detail on our next steps, but just want to make sure the board is aware of the court case and the ruling, and that we are still looking at how that impacts our future advertising policy. Also, there is two items that the board, I would like the board to consider moving forward when we talk about committees. One is to ask your opinion on the restructuring of the board meetings that include the consent agenda and the reformatting to speed up the reporting, the KPIs, the operational key performance indicators to you. If that is too streamlined, if you like more information or less, trying to balance the desires of the board to meet a fully informed board versus a streamlined report. So for the discussion around the committee rules in a few minutes, but wanted to make sure that that was addressed at this time for you to start thinking about. Also, it was brought to my attention that because we are now meeting in person, virtual attendance by board members is currently not allowed because we do not have a board policy around it. So should the board want to have virtual attendance on occasion, and the MPO took up a policy that I think was modeled, if it's desired at the board, Bonnie said she would be pleased to come back in June with a draft for your consideration for virtual attendance of board meetings. And we'll work through that. The last item on my report is to discuss staffing. I asked the key members of our senior leadership team to get together yesterday Last week, we did get the report. Tim did give me the updated report about our staffing, and we have seen an increase in resignations. The staff came back and showed that a significant number of those resignations, about 66%, are happening with people who are between that 0 to 4 years in service. We have several initiatives we're looking at to try and increase that retention. We have some discussions that we will be having with the union on pay. We have some discussions about that were approved by the board for other pay. We have a program that we'll be looking at with a local firm that is trying to remember. I'm sorry, I didn't write it down. They support their mentor program that support police and the police, firefighters, first responders, and EMS to provide peer groups and peer training to give that internal support mentor to mentor. I'll be talking later this week about how we can stand up such a group here so that operators specifically will have a mentor group to have that peer-to-peer support. We've talked about pastor programs as well to give them that internal support, and we're looking to increase our communications. We have upticked our communications to staff, but clearly not enough, so we will be upticking that as well. And if there's any questions on that about what we're doing, I would love to have Tim and Cheryl also report out some of the initiatives we're looking to readdress this. I'm happy to hear that our class sizes are up and that our ability to permit our drivers has been approved by the MV. So we should be able to release a lot of our trainee operators into the program. But if we don't stop the loss of them, we will continue to have this problem. So if there are no other questions, but I suspect there would be. Yes, sir.
So resignation as it relates to drivers,
Yes.
you said several. What is several equates to what?
Several equates to, Tim has the exact numbers, but I believe it was approximately 10 last month and 10 this month, or am I overstating that?
Well, really, the uptick pretty much took place a few months ago. March, for example, we had 13 operators in the operator ranks. In April, it was 8, and so far this month it's 6. So that's how we've been trending the last few months.
So what was average before March?
We were losing about four operators per month prior to first part of this year.
So you say you identified 0 to 4 years. Do you do exit interviews?
Yes.
And what's the rationale? I mean, why did you?
Several reasons. Some of it is quality of life. We're looking at how the runs are being structured. That's one area. Some of them have child care concerns, safety concerns.
What do you mean child care?
Well, with some like the mothers, for example, or fathers that may have issues with child care. Some jobs are different from GRTC, for example, because we operate at night, weekends, when you have some other businesses in the industry, whether it be trucking and so forth, their hours are more set in terms of set hours a day. Because we have some shifts that are split, some that operate nights, weekends, that does create a challenge for some of our parents out there that may not be able to have those child care situations resolved.
So I got an email. So you assign runs when?
We have 3 general bids a year. One was this past month, the 1st of May. We have one in the fall, one in the winter.
And if I might, we don't assign them, they are bid by seniority.
Yes.
So do I come in, I'm a new driver, I know what my schedule is, or I don't?
No. Once you go through the training, after you go through training, depending on when the timing of the scheduled run bid occurs, you may go to the extra board. And operators that go on the extra board, their hours may vary. They may not know from day to day.
So then that's the issue. So one day I could be split, another day I could be night, another day I could be morning, next
Yes.
week it could be. Okay, I'm just trying to understand it because if I'm applying for a job and I know I gotta work nights, I don't understand how that could be a childcare issue. But if I don't know my schedule from week to week,
and it could be all over the place, and I can understand.
And typically, we do have, between 20 and 30 operators on the extra board. And the extra board are operators who don't have a regular assignment, but they fill in for operators that are on vacation, leave, and so forth.
So pretty much if you're new, you're gonna end up on the extra.
To some degree, once the new run bid takes place, depending on how many runs are available, you may wind up with a regular run, or in some cases, you may wind up on the extra.
So just to get this straight, I'm in line based on my seniority on what I can bid for.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And at least for many drivers, the last choice would be extra board.
Not necessarily.
Not necessary.
Because we have some operators that choose the
They
extra.
want that. But it's quite possible that I've been here for 6 months and that I can end up on the extra board because nobody else wanted it.
Could be, but in a lot of cases, and I'll tell you what happened with this scenario with this last booking. Since we had about 230 some operators, we had 215 regular runs. So once those runs are all picked, then yes, whatever's left would be the extra board. But in some cases, like I said, some operators do choose the extra board because they like that different run, different structure each week and so forth. They can pretty much plan their lives around that.
If I might, Mr. President.
Yeah, some operators, like I said, like the extra board, because they can make more overtime. Overtime, operators on the extra board have first choice of open work.
Oh,
So they
They can add
who
work
wants
to,
to
yeah.
make, time and a half or overtime, they have first choice. If on their off day, whatever.
If I can also add to that, as we've hit COVID and as we've had to reduce some of our runs, what that means is that as opposed to when we were growing, we have more and more day runs and more optimal runs. As we move into having to reuse everything, that means all the different runs are reduced, which means that there are fewer of those preferred runs. If you've been here for some period of time and you want to be able to move to a preferred run, and yet all the runs are down, it means that you have to stay with those night and weekend runs longer. And that's, I believe, a lot of the frustration I'm hearing from much of the operations staff is they feel like they've been here for a long time, and yet they're never able to get those preferred runs because they're being taken by the senior staff. And until we're able to get more operators, until we're able to expand that service back out, we're going to stay in the situation. So we need everyone on board as a GRTC family to be able to retain and maintain that idea that we are doing everything we can to improve the quality of life and the support for our operators so that they stay. And the longer they stay, when we get that higher service level out, there will be more of those preferred runs to get more out there for our operations staff. That needs to be an all-in communications.
But hopefully we're gonna grow in operators as well, so we'll continue to have the same issue. We'll have more runs, but we'll have more operators, and we'll have more open.
I have to just to acknowledge that is the issue with a growing transit system. As you grow, you get more frequency during the day, but you also get more frequency at night and weekends. So that will always be the issue.
and there's no salary effect based on what particular one said, I guess.
There are slight differentials for evenings, and we are looking to have some conversations about how we can possibly discuss higher differentials for those less desirable ones.
Right, is there any limitation how many hours you can drive in a given week?
No, we don't have hours of service rules like over the road operators.
That I understand that before my time, there was a push for that for the over the road, and that was legislated, but there was a push against it for the intra-regional, and so intra-regional there is no rule.
What percentage of the drivers are doing overtime on average, and how's that compared to COVID?
I know we have those numbers. I don't have that in my head either.
Good question. We could follow with that. I want to speculate. Yes, But we do have a fair amount of folks who do work quite a bit of overtime. That much I can do.
There are a group of operators that is what they do. They maximize their overtime, and there are others that work just their hours, and that's all, they balance that with their life. We can get you those numbers. We do have them. I just don't have them in front of us.
I'll be interested in seeing.
And overtime is time and a half?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Julie, any change to the differentials for nighttime pay or some of the other items you just discussed? Are all of those details subject to the collective bargaining with the union?
Yes, sir.
All of that would require the union approval.
Yes, sir.
or Coordination through the next contract.
They would. We did, when COVID first hit, we did have some discussions, I should say, with the union regarding some possible pay differentials for entry-level staff and for the, as overall, for all the operators. Unfortunately, those weren't successful. So we put in, instead of putting it that in place, we put in the bonuses for the new hires. We hope to reinitiate those talks soon.
And I assume the same applies to the bid process for preferred routes. Is that also part of your negotiation?
It has, I know that it has come up in the past. I believe that we will probably bring it up in future negotiations to talk about seniority. It is one of those very sensitive topics with the union, and it really depends on if that is the desire of the union staff. We would not want to push too hard on that at this time. If it is the desire of the union to stay seniority based, which is what I've heard it is, that is not on the top of my agenda to push. I think that it should be discussed openly with our staff. There are some possibilities there that could make retention better if we could talk about certain set-asides or percents. There are other things that have been done across the country to do different models, but again, that has to be negotiated.
Another question, sorry. Come from a locality where we don't really have unions. This may be an ignorant question. Who is negotiating on that? Right?
Right now, it is the primary team that negotiates would be our operating team. It would be Cheryl, Tim, John will be part of that team. In the past, the patching negotiations, I led it. In the future, it will be the senior chiefs.
Okay, these are non-public meetings.
They're not helpful. Correct.
No.
Correct, unless it can be negotiated to be open. And, to date, I do not know of many union negotiations that are agreed to be open.
I don't really, I'm just asking. But you guys negotiate and you come back and report to us.
Yes, that anything that would have a significant change to how we operate, that would have a financial impact.
Usually
We'll come back to this board.
include such.
Yes, sir.
When the board approves the contract.
The board would approve the final contract after it has been approved by the union. We negotiated, they have a tentative agreement, the union votes on it, and then if all approved, it would come to this board to ratify.
So the negotiators are acting on our behalf.
Yes,
But we get the final vote.
yes.
Okay.
How often is it renegotiated?
For every 3 years, although we are looking to have a discussion here shortly to open up certain terms of it because of the issues we're having in staffing.
Were we at 230 full-time employees last meeting, or at 234 now? Is that right?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your question.
The number of full-time employees the last time we met, was that at 230?
No, I think last month we were about 240 or something around there.
Yeah.
So we're actually
239.
239, so we're down employees.
We are.
Are not even.
We are going down, and part of the issue is because we have that higher loss, and part of the issue is, and Tim, correct me if I say this wrong, is that we haven't been able to release people from training because of the issues with the BNB licensing, but we did get that fixed.
Yes, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration put in a new rule February 7th. And that rule basically said that you had to be pre-approved to be a provider to offer training for operators who don't have a CDL. So before, and when we brought new people in, a lot of them did not have a CDL. So that didn't prohibit us from training them, but that did restrict us from completing that training. But we just got that approval late last week. Our training manager is going through the system now to get those individuals processed. We have about 6 or so churches last count that were waiting for CDLs. These are ones back on class if you want to go over this year. Normally it takes about 2 months to get through training, but these folks have stretched into the third month, basically because of that issue.
And if I might, that was a national issue and the state has been struggling with it. Our team has been working very actively and they should be congratulated. They did get that approval here, where others are still working on theirs. Not to brag on my team, but
So we're looking to try to get back to where we were last month, next month.
Oh, yes.
yes. It has been, this month has been.
Yes, but like I said earlier, we do have a class starting June 6th. And optimistically, that may be a double-digit class. And we're on pace to have a class about every month. So this will be our 6th class coming up.
Further questions?
There is some mandatory time off in between runs.
Yes,
Yeah. So an operator, 8 hours, 5 hours, between runs? 10 hours have to be off, 10 hours before they can come back to work.
Correct.
Yeah, and in other words, no one can get off at 12 o'clock at night on a late run and come back at 5 in the morning. That's not allowed. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
And the prior contract, I believe the number was 8 hours when we went.
Well, whatever the hours is, there is a mandatory
There is.
time between.
Yes.
But a shift could be split. I mean, a shift could be 12 to 4, then 4 to 10, right? Is that what the, I mean?
Not usually at night.
Normally, each service, you could, run this person at 5 in the morning, get off at 9, and come back at afternoon and finish up your last.
Yeah.
We try and minimize the amount of split and try and minimize the time between splits. It's a long day when you have a long split. We did, the last negotiation was one where we did increase from that 8 hour to the 10 hour. Some of the comments that we received from some operators was that by the time they got off work late at night and they drove home and they went to sleep, they had to get up and come back. So the amount of time they had to sleep was too short. If they had to come back after 8 hours, that's why that was increased to 10, which for that quality of life for people to get home and come back. It does have an impact on our service, but
And
it's
safety.
quality of life.
And safe.
And safety,
Of course.
absolutely.
All right, thank you. Let's go ahead.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, if there are no other questions, that does conclude my report for me.
Ready? And I have nothing to say in the report except thank you for being here today. And we've got, I do want to go ahead with these resolutions. Do we have text in them somewhere?
It is on the,
It's on here.
yes, sir.
Okay, well, these are resolutions honoring the two long-term board members, one's longer than the other, who've left. The first is George Braxton, who was here when I got here and had been here quite a while. So, how long did he have? 9 years? 11 years?
I believe it's 9 years.
Well, George, not having been in enough trouble as school board chair in Richmond, ended up as board chair of GRTC. So this is, whereas George Braxton served as representative of Richmond on the board since April 2013, served as chair from November 2013 to October 2017, spearheading increasing frequency and services to our counties and cities, serving as board chairman for the Pulse Project, catalyst for the inception and execution to deliver zero fare. Now be it resolved that we, the Greater Richmond Transit Company Board of Directors, express our sincere appreciation for his service to Greater Richmond Transit as many contributions to the board. Can someone read that, please? Second. All right, discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. George was really rigorous in his when I came on, and outlining the fiduciary responsibility of board members for this company. That is you have two responsibilities. One is you're representing your locality. And the other is you're a board member for this company and responsible as a fiduciary for it. And George really was really clear about that and felt it was important. He's not here to say it, and I can't say it for him, but I felt like he really had clarity on what was important as we go forward. Second gratitude is for Ian Milliken, who was a really sharp man who came here for a couple of years. October 2018, from Chesterfield. He was in high school with my son, so I kind of he worked effectively to ensure regional collaboration in public transportation options. He really had strength as a business leader with Wallace Montgomery. He's a good consultant in transportation, and was a strong and effective supporter for maintenance and advancement of public transit in Chesterfield, for which we're all grateful. Be it resolved that we as the Greater Richmond Transit Board express our sincere appreciation for Mr. Milliken's service to GRTC and his many contributions to the board. Could I have someone move this, please? Any second? Second. All in favor? Any opposed? No. Here's our pretty pictures. This is George. And this is me and Ian. Okay, thank you all for that. Yes.
Just as you see those pretty pictures, we'll have some more, another photography session for the new board members who don't have a free picture on the bus. We do that for our senior staff and for our board members at the faces or online. I suspect it'll happen maybe this summer or fall. So if you do not have one of those free pictures, please know that they're coming.
Now we have a resolution honoring Todd Ewer for his service on the RideFinders Advisory Board. Vaughn, are you going to present this? Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman of the Board and members of the board. Before I read this presentation, let me say I am the originator of that mysterious musical concerto with war. So let me get that out of the way to my chagrin and just extend a little grace here and accept my apologies for that. Thank you. Here's the presentation, the resolution. Whereas Todd Ewer was appointed to serve on the RideFinders Advisory Board and has done so for over 20 years in an efficient, professional, consultative, and inclusive manner. And whereas Todd Ewer has always been mindful of the interests of RideFinders, and he has worked tirelessly and with unwavering dedication to advance the mission and goals of RideFinders and provided guidance and assistance. And whereas Todd Ewer has brought respect, honor, and integrity to the RideFinders Advisory Board by leading by example while serving the citizens of Henrico County and the Greater Richmond region. And whereas Todd Ewer has exhibited outstanding community spirit in his service while maintaining a demeanor that made working with him a pleasure. And whereas Todd Ewer's invaluable support, willingness, and ability to understand and respond to the transportation and mobility access needs and concerns of the citizenry of Henrico County and the RideFinders organization have made an immeasurable contribution to the betterment of the Greater Richmond region. Now therefore be it resolved that the RideFinders Advisory Board does hereby commend Todd Ewer for his legacy of dedication, enthusiasm, and outstanding public service given to RideFinders and Henrico County on this third day of May 2022. It's signed by the RideFinders Advisory Board Chair, Chester Walker, and myself, Vaughn Tisdale. And so we thank and commend Todd. And the words sound very flattering, but they're very sincere and very heartfelt. We thank you for the great work.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations, Todd. I don't think we have to vote on that, do we?
Unless you want to reinforce it.
Oh, okay. Well, I think our applause reinforced it. I will say, Mr. Ewer is a support to a lot of people in this community in terms of his very constructive work and staff work on public transit, and has been that for many years. I know it, others know it.
Yeah, all right, so a couple things. I don't know how many here remember Corbett. She passed. She was very active for people with disabilities.
Yes.
And her funeral is, I think, Friday this week at Jenkins Funeral Home here in the West End.
Thank you.
Cora worked with GRTC and that community is, I'm very young.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I just wanted, and she was also mentioned at City Council, yes, last night. The next thing I want to congratulate one of the, I guess, chiefs or directors here at GRTC at his wedding. Stand up, Mr. Newlywed.
Seems like a year ago.
I got 51 years.
That's so busy.
There was some coaching that we received. He has pictures that we'll have to show you of the amazing Jack coat that he wore. His wife did a beautiful job playing.
It was all over AAA. I know why. You know why?
Yes, sir.
All right.
All right, finally, we have a presentation from Julie on the proposed committee structure for this board.
And it's less of a presentation, more of a conversation based on the conversation of this board last month. It was asked that we have a consideration of committees and what that would entail. As I did research with Bonnie, and Bonnie reached out and we talked about what would be quorum and what those meetings would require. What we did find out is that indeed, for us to have committees, we would need committees, the board would need to have committees of 4 to 5 people on that committee in order to maintain quorum and public open forum rules, open public meeting rules of 3 or more. If we have smaller committees, regardless of the size of this group, a committee of 3 means that quorum would be 2, and that means that no 2 members of the committee could meet without it being an open session. So in order to present a reasonable and viable committee structure, it would likely mean that we would have to have 4 or 5 committees would be the recommendation. The committees that I would recommend if we move forward with would be a board advisory committee, policy committee to look at the policies of the board, an operations committee that looks at the staffing and the maintenance and the operation KPIs, a finance committee that would look at the financial issues in depth of it, as well as looking at our annual budget, and a development committee, policy committee that would look at the structure of our service and expansion of our service, as well as our capital projects and oversight of those. I would recommend that we move on those 4 committees in order to do that with having 5 members on each committee, which would mean that each board member would likely be requested to volunteer for at least 2 committees. Now, some of these committees could move forward quarterly. They wouldn't all have to meet monthly. It would allow us to continue to streamline these meetings. But I didn't bring a specific proposal today, just a concept for discussion and a request from the board if you want to see this advanced, or if you want further time to consider to see how the current board structure and the streamline is working before you take action on that. And that is the discussion I have for the board today.
So question, if we do this, do we still meet with you monthly?
The individual meetings, I believe very strongly that the CEO's role with each individual board member needs to be an ongoing relationship. And I would ask that we do have time to meet individually to talk about priorities and activities of the board, regardless of committee structure.
Well, I suggested this, Mr. Chair, my personal opinion would be that
maybe have Julie, put some more meat on the bones of what the committee would look like. And then, I guess we can talk about it more. My concern is that we have to sit on two committees and then still meet with you. I mean, it's almost like we're adding more work versus, so clearly this was streamlined, and I really appreciate it. But I don't want us to have to, I mean, this could possibly, if we have two committees, and this can be 4 meetings. So that would be a lot.
So Julie, go back on the, thank you. Go back to the, that quorum thing that you said you worked out with mine. I didn't quite understand.
I can read it, it's a little technical, but it's a big paragraph, but under the Virginia Code, the Freedom of Information Act, for public meetings, regardless of the size of this group or any board, a meeting with more than 2 members must be.
2 or more, or more than 2?
More than 2.
all right.
More than 2.
Has to be public.
Has to be public. However, it has to be made public if there's 2 or less. If you have a committee that's 3, then quorum would be 2, and that quorum would then translate into having.
So if it's a 3-member committee and only 2 people show up, it still is subject to the freedom of information.
Correct. And all private conversations, individual conversations that you might be having, like one-on-one, sometimes you can talk one-on-one, and it doesn't have to be public every time. You talk, it would shift that for this board.
Just between those 2.
Just between those 2 or any 2 of that committee.
So for example, if there were 3 committees established, 1 member from each jurisdiction was assigned to it. So let's just assume, in a perfect world,
right,
there was 3 committees, whatever they are. 1 member Richmond, 1 member trustee, 1 member representing each other, 3 committees. If Mr. Engel and I were on committee B, we could not speak to each other about that committee work. We could still speak to each other. We could speak about business.
Yes, that's my understanding.
But it wouldn't impact my conversations with Lincoln or with Mr. Nelson or whoever if they weren't on that committee. Just the committee.
I'm looking the legal library, that is correct.
Which would make, that's right.
So just you couldn't talk about that
Committee
business.
work.
Okay.
I think the outline you gave is a strong one. I mean, whether it's 2 committees or 3, I mean, it seems like finance and budget is one that needs to be an opportunity for discussion, and it's somewhat, I think, helpful to have the 1-1-1 that you suggested, Dan, so that some work can be done, and you can be communicating with your other representatives from your locality to kind of get a sense of what direction the local jurisdiction is going. I think budget and finance, clearly operations, where particularly as we start looking towards the expansion plans, is something that I think we need to, unless we're going to have many work sessions of 9, we need to have committees that are empowered to do some ground up in public meetings and begin these difficult conversations, or at least significant conversations about the direction we want to go. Now, to Mr. Nelson's point, I would say the committees could be, regular, but also, structured. I mean, I would expect finance and budget to need to meet monthly in the months leading up to our budget proposal and approval. I would imagine the operations side would need to meet regularly particularly as we lead into, our next steps in conversation and expansion. So I don't know if it would have to be 12 committee meetings a year, but it could be scheduled around the work of the board. And, again, I agree with the recommendation to come back with something a little bit more fully fleshed out with maybe this, unless anybody has any other kind of different direction to go, or a third topic that we think rises to the level of needing committee structure and work.
We probably have an immediate but short-term committee, which is the Zero Fair. We're gonna have to make a decision in the fall months before next year's budget, so. That, it's not gonna be a long-term committee, but it's something that's gonna have to be put together.
My thought would be to either include in that or, I think zero fare and expansion conversations are gonna have to happen together. And so I would consider that part of the conversation. on the
That's
expansion
fair
of
enough,
GRTC.
but that would be 3 committees theoretically.
So in your
If you look
In
at
your
policy.
proposal, as you come to us, please tell us which of these situations you think will be dealing with the zero fare issue, so that we do make sure that's a part of the proposal as we move forward.
So if I may, the original recommendation that I would have brought forward for conversation, of having 4 or 5 members, you are actually, we'd like to entertain having a 3-member committee.
Yes.
And I guess in an ideal world, if you could tell the board what it would look like, you certainly give us options. What would it look like if there were 3 core committees, of course, finance and budget is one, clear, and I think easily operations, maintenance, KPIs, that's one. But then some type of development, service routes, which I think would include zero fare, would be third. I think the 4th one you referenced would be policy, board operations, bylaws, more like a governance type thing. I think we could come together as a 9 and have those ad hoc as we need to. But if there's 3 key core buckets, how can we, just because of the nature of this board and the numbers and how it sets up, at Commissioner Nelson's point, I think we can be really effective if we each serve on one and save some time, knowing that there are some legal necessities that need to be maintained.
Just
think
let
we
each
can-
jurisdiction decide, if we go to 3 committees, just let each jurisdiction decide who would be the representative.
Yeah, and that's what I would say. I know Julia asked you for some work on that. I think on our part, our work would be to be prepared. Should that occur, how would we each like to designate our representatives to those? Just be prepared for that so we can move forward with it and not wait another month while we all decide on where we're all going.
I will have something to do. I do expect at this rate, the June board meeting to be a little bit longer between this conversation and the infrastructure conversation and the other major procurements I expect to come forward. We might see a little bit of a longer meeting next month, but then we can streamline for that again.
Well, the big streamlining that occurred in the staff reports was really, really helpful. And y'all felt okay about that. I mean, that really makes a difference.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for.
And clearly there's work to do a budget work session, which made the budget a little bit. So I mean, there was pre-work done.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, thank you. And so we'll expect a report from you on this at the next meeting. Are there any further comments for the good and welfare of this board? If not, the board meeting of GRTC for May is concluded.